how am I going to navigate this situation? What does my social calendar look like? How am I going to get to that event? What am I going to drink at that event? And a lot of kind of scenario planning in my head.
I don't know who created the rules. And to me, I know that breaking my sobriety is ingesting something to get out of my body.
99% of the time, once you've had the first drink as non-alcoholic, you're satisfied and you've gone, yeah, that non-alc beer was great. I'll have another one.
My husband wanted to do dry January years and years ago, and everything happens when it's supposed to happen. But I'm like, God, I would have just been so much happier for so much longer.
So welcome back to the Upward Spiral podcast, where we explore the surprising joys and profound impact of drinking less. I am your host, Michelle O'Brien, and today we have a truly inspiring guest. This is Jill Seitz, a seasoned beverage industry pro who has made a bold career move from marketing alcohol to championing non-alcoholic beverages. We're going to dive into her personal story, discover the secrets to finding balance and well-being without the booze, and we're going to explore the exciting world of non-alcoholic options. I've got a million questions for Jill, and I'm hoping to come away with lots of recommendations. So grab your favorite non-alcoholic drink and we'll get stuck in. Good morning. Wait, hang on. Good evening.
Yes.
Jill.
Yes.
I think we're on opposite ends of the world right now.
We are on opposite ends of the world.
What time is it for you?
It is 8:39 p.m.
Okay, and it's 8:39 a.m. From the future. So I'm in Singapore, you're in New York.
Yes.
Thank you so much for staying up for me.
Anything for you. But yes, it is definitely past my bedtime.
I love it. When you messaged me last night, you were like, I'm going to be in my pajamas. I was like, yes, that is definitely should be a thing. I might start doing that with any.
I kind of love it. I kind of like the idea of like talking about non-alcoholic products in bed.
Yes.
I'm obviously not in bed, but like, you know, PJs.
There's definitely perks to this not drinking.
Totally. And waking up feeling great is one of them.
Yeah, I'm all about the staying up late, and I'm a morning person. So I was up at 5:30 this morning. I've done my leg day, strength training boot camp. I have got home, got myself dressed, put makeup on, done my hair. I am baking bread at the moment, and my kids are up and off and on the way to school. So
that's a lot of things. I just want to point that out.
I just feel like I'm winning.
That's a lot. That's a lot of things. I mean, I have done a lot today, but you've only had the morning time.
Yeah, it's great. And then by 9:30, I will have shot a podcast. And then basically, if I want, I could spend the rest of the day on the sofa. So
agreed. I grant you permission for that. That's amazing. Oh my God.
I'm all about the early mornings and waking up feeling.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible, right? Like I have been a morning person for the last, 30 years. And even when I was drinking, I don't drink at all anymore. I would be a morning person because I just woke up early, but I woke up early feeling like crap. So like the option to wake up early still, and it's funny, I sleep a little bit later now, but waking up early and feeling great is just like, I should have done this years ago.
Yeah, I feel like I was conflicted for such a long time. Like I've always been a morning person. I love getting out and exercising and everything else. But I was always like just so conflicted because I thought I should be out partying and being with my peers and drinking or socializing with colleagues or networking, whatever it was that I was doing the night before. And I was just really, really conflicted between what I wanted to do deep down and who I was as kind of a person deep down and what society was kind of, a culture was telling me I should be doing.
100%. I was in the alcohol business for so long. I just had this conversation today with a friend, actually. I was the kind of person before I stopped drinking that if you asked me what I did, I said, I'm in alcohol. And when I stopped drinking, my then therapist was like, she had to get me to stop. Like, all of a sudden, I was no longer my job. And trust me, like, I still love my work. I love the industry. I talk about it passionately. But I no longer say, like I don't say I'm in non-alc. I say, like, oh, I do this in non-alc. Or, oh, I'm a wife. Or, I'm a wife. I live in New York. I do all these things. But I was so, like, about my alcoholic life, and whatever, like, I was so about the alcohol, to be frank, that I just never separated myself from it. And I think the stopping of drinking really made me take a look at the other isms, workaholism, other isms that I really had adopted without even understanding the collaboration between the two.
I also just kind of touch on that, your identity kind of being so wrapped up in what you do and your job and everything. And I was exactly the same, and because I was always so passionate about working in advertising, like I loved it so much. But it was very much kind of me, and it was a lot of what I talked about. And for the longest time, it was like, I work at Disney, and it was, I couldn't wait for somebody to ask me what I did so I could say I work at Disney. It was such like a big part of my identity, until kind of it wasn't. And, having to kind of figure that out, at kind of the same time of me, stopping drinking and stopping working at Disney, everything kind of all happened around the same time. Yeah, it's funny how kind of you attach these labels to yourself.
For me, the clarity that came with the ceasing of drinking and ceasing of other substances at the same time was insane. Like, and it happened in a way that was so quick that I almost wasn't ready for it. I didn't notice it until, months later, but I was like, oh, because at first for me personally, there was like a lot of dealing with stuff that would come up. But then eventually I was like, oh, I'm not a totally different person, but I'm a totally different person. And the things that I allow myself to do or like let in or talk about or whatever are completely different. And I'm only 2.5 years older than I was then.
I was actually more shocked that I was like, oh, I'm actually a good person.
Yes.
And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think when you drink, I was just always had so much like self-doubt and maybe behaved in ways that I wasn't always particularly proud of. And you kind of take that away. And there was a lot of kind of working with my therapist as well and working through it that I was like, oh shit, I'm actually a really good person. And I'm proud of who I am. I like myself. Like I actually like who I am.
It's so true. It's so true.
That's an amazing feeling. And that's like a feeling that I will fight to keep now.
I mean, my marriage got so much better. My communication with my friends got better. Not all of them, some of them less. And I'm not friends with those people anymore, to be completely honest. Like there were people that were my drinking or whatever friends. And there was a lot of like, okay, no, thank you. Like, I just don't want to be friends with you anymore. We're not friends anymore. That's great. There were people that had to wrap their heads around it and like a year later kind of figured it out. But my communication skills with people that I love are so much better. And I know how to like be around them or not be around them. And I think people think that when you stop drinking or if you moderate your drinking, that your life is going to like drastically get worse, or you're going to be boring, or you're not going to know what to do with yourself, or you're not going to be social. And I think there is a transition period, probably. Like for me, there was. I didn't go out for a while, right? But it was also kind of the end of COVID. It was like the end of 2021. But I think that you first kind of figure out who you are without drinking. And for me, I was very lucky. My husband and I did it together. But then you start to figure out like, okay, I can go out. And now it's so much easier with non-alcoholic beverages. I mean, it's like cake. But you start to figure out like, oh, it's okay. I can go out. And then eventually it gets so easy. Like now it's like nothing for me. And, I would appreciate a place where there is an NA. But also if there's not, I'm like, okay, I may not stay out as long. But I'm definitely like, okay being in an environment with people who are drinking, who are having a good time, and being okay with who I am.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it takes a little bit of time. I don't think that I was like fully prepared for the journey that I was going to go on in terms of like my sense of self in that kind of first year. The first 6 months, there was a lot of thinking about alcohol, less from like I wasn't craving it, I didn't want it, I didn't want it in my body anymore, but more around like, how am I going to navigate this situation? What does my social calendar look like? How am I going to get to that event? What am I going to drink at that event? and a lot of kind of scenario planning in my head. What am I going to say when this person, who are the potential triggers, or what are the potential triggers? What am I going to say when faced with them? So there's a lot of kind of scenario planning in my head of how I was going to deal with that particular situation. But I think, any particular situation. But kind of after that first 6 months, you then things start to come up. You've not drank for a while. You're thinking less about alcohol and how you're going to manage different situations, and a lot of reflection comes up. Why were you maybe kind of drinking excessively? You know, I didn't particularly like myself when I drank. A lot of shame came up for me, actually, and a lot of regret, and a lot of, just quite embarrassed about times that I behaved. And I'm talking like things that happened 15 years ago, fights that I had with my friends on holiday. It wasn't even things that were like necessarily recent, but it really kind of brought up some things about, that I had to kind of tackle. And it was great because I felt like I was ready to tackle them, and like I had the energy to do so. And a lot of kind of my limiting beliefs were actually kind of wrapped up in, in the recovery that I was going through as well. So it's been, a journey.
I love that. I think it's awesome. I'm never one to tell people like you should get sober. I think moderating your drinking is always just an interesting journey to try. I never thought I was an alcoholic. My entire family, like my dad's whole line is my brothers we always said like we're functional alcoholics. I think the end of my drinking helped my brothers really like take a look at their drinking. But I would never have said I'm an alcoholic until I figured out that I was one, which happened far after I stopped drinking. Like it took a lot of reflection to really look back and be like, oh no, I was a full-fledged alcoholic. You don't really like put those words in anyone's mouth. Like, and there are people today who are like, you weren't an alcoholic. I'm like, okay, but you never saw, like, I wasn't a wake up and drink a bottle of vodka in the morning alcoholic. And I could go weeks without drinking. But when I drank, and it wasn't pretty. And yes, I could have a glass of wine at night, but like the shame spiral that I like apologized to my husband for things and like realized how gross they're like just stuff. So I always think like it's great that there are periods that people like choose to stop drinking now, like dry January and dry July and sober October and whatever else is around, because I think it really just causes people to like just take a look, right? Like first of all, probably you'll exercise more. Second of all, like your face will probably feel better and you'll lose a little bit of weight. And like, so maybe you'll extend that. And I have a lot of friends who have like done dry January and just never gone back because you truly love the way you feel. And whether you have a glass of wine every once in a while, awesome. I don't necessarily think sobriety is for everyone or whatever you want to call your lifestyle. I think there's a lot of stigma around what you call it right now. But I know a ton of people who just don't drink anymore. And they would never say, never will I ever, never will I taste something, never will I ever. But I think it's a really just, it's a thing.
Yeah,
it's a thing.
for sure. I'd love to actually talk to you about labeling it, because I know that there's kind of few conversations happening online at the moment about labeling yourself sober. And so maybe as someone kind of who identifies as having an alcohol addiction, I'm on the other side of that. Like I definitely didn't crave alcohol, didn't necessarily want to drink. That kind of side of it, or the little monster, as Alan Carr calls it, wasn't the issue for me. It was the big monster. It was the social beliefs and the brainwashing and the community and what everyone else was saying around me and the social connections. That was the reason why I drank. And would drink to excess because everyone around me was. I'm quite a small person, so I would be, the person that was throwing up in the taxi on the way home at 35 years old, because I couldn't quite, I couldn't handle it. My body didn't want it. But coming back to the labels, I am trying to call myself alcohol free, rather than sober, and it's something that I want to explore more, and I want to maybe talk to people who have suffered from maybe a kind of more of that serious end of addiction and who are in recovery, as to how they actually feel about so many people labeling themselves sober who maybe haven't gone through the same journey and the same like recovery process, because it's tough. And I don't ever want to take anything away from people who are going through that.
You know, it's funny. I didn't do recovery. I did Alan Carr. And it's funny. I just did Alan Carr's book about sugar. So when you say big monster, it's life-changing. But when you say big monster, little monster, it's like now I'm like in sugar mode. I know a lot of people who have done recovery and would say non-alcoholic products are for non-alcoholics, right? But I also have the other side of it, which like I know somebody who was very, very seriously in recovery for alcohol and cocaine. He has no problem using THC, as he calls it, which is marijuana, for medicine, whatever that means. He's like, THC never killed me, like never tried to kill me. Alcohol, ecstasy, and cocaine tried to kill me. And he's in AA, has a sponsor, his sponsor's aware, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I should not be made to feel shame. And I don't want to call myself Cali sober. He's like, I think that's bullshit. But there are people who think that he's not sober. I think that's insane. And I'm like, why does anybody else get to judge anyone else's sobriety journey? So there's that side of it. The other side of it is I think anybody who's been in recovery should not care, right? Like I get it. People care. I mean, this is Ted Segers, which is my like favorite project. It's Dax Shepard and a couple of his best friends. They are all in recovery, all of them. They have 60 years of AA between them. And it's the non-alcoholic beer for alcoholics. It's an alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic beer by alcoholics for alcoholics. That's their like tagline. So like they clearly are like, it's time to break the stigma, right? So that's how I feel about it. I feel like someday I may want to smoke pot again. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know that it should happen anytime soon, but it might. I may feel like I am so blessed by my own sanity that it doesn't want to take me out of my body. I think alcohol-free is far better than non-alcoholic. Like the words non-alcoholic for some reason get so stuck in my throat, but I say them all the time. I think alcohol-free is great. I was talking to Matt, one of the owners of the brand AF, Free AF, at a trade show last week. And he's like, I really wish we hadn't like coined ourselves Sober AF because there's so much stigma around sober. And I was like, look, I think sober curious is great. I think moderately drinking is great. I think alcohol-free is great. I think there's too many labels out there this point in our lives. And like, you should call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. I think we are all too caught up in what everybody else is doing in this movement. Like people don't even want to call it a movement. There's so much drama around it that it's like, I don't quite understand it because there's rising tides should be lifting all boats, to be honest with you. And everybody seems to just want to butt heads about what we call it, what we do, what we don't do. What can you do? People are drinking non-alcoholic products. Can we just be happy about that? Some people are drinking less. Let's be happy about that. Some people are putting no alcohol and low alcohol in the same cocktail. That's fantastic for them. Like at the end of the day, it's all so much healthier. That's what I care about. Like for the planet and for people's livers, it's healthier. And I think for people's mental health, it's healthier. And I think for people's children not to grow up the way some of us grew up, it's healthier. So, you know, I did adult children of alcoholics instead of AA. I went to a few meetings and the 70-year-old people that were in there still upset about how they were raised frightened the hell out of me. So I'm like, if boomers are feeling this and I'm feeling this, let's just hope that the younger generations don't. So I don't care what you call it. I think you call it whatever you feel appropriate about. And if you have a friend in recovery who says this triggers me, don't call it that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's also a lot around kind of putting all of these rules around it as well. And you know, I can feel like quite deeply that I've like let myself down if I've had a drink, and I don't drink. That being said, my husband opened a really amazing bottle of champagne at the weekend that we bought in Champagne. We had friends over. I tried it. Like I didn't drink a glass, but I tried it. And I think, and it was fine. I didn't want a glass, but if I'd have done, maybe I would, right? But I think you know, there would be questions from people. Did it break my sobriety? Oh no, I've broken my streak, and I feel really let down, and I've let myself down. And then there becomes kind of a lot of pressure, and then you could end up kind of going, well, I've had a sip, so I may as well have the bottle. And I think, as soon as you kind of get these rules around it, it can, be there's pressure.
I am in a business in which is alcohol around me. I worked at Betty Buzz and they started Betty Booze, and I tasted the formulations. I spit them out, but there are many people who would say that I broke my sobriety. I didn't swallow anything. I didn't break my sobriety. First of all, I didn't break my sobriety. Second of all, I had anesthesia. Does that break my sobriety? Like, I don't know who created the rules. And to me, I know that breaking my sobriety is ingesting something to get out of my body, right? Like, I'm not going to drink, but like if I were to, like, I've had a CBD pen that has some THC in it to go to bed. I can use it for that reason. It's got like this much THC in it, but if I use it because I am anxious or I need to get out of my brain or whatever, that's breaking my sobriety. But if I'm like, I need to go to bed, or I have a migraine, or it's a random Saturday and I just whatever, like, that's the difference. I think I have not done it on a random Saturday, but like, I think that's for me personally. Like, I think tasting your phenomenal bottle of champagne, when as answered or as stated, you're the big monster, not the little monster, right? Like, you're not going to trigger the little monster, and you're not probably going to trigger the big monster. Like, I think you're okay. And I think people put too much emphasis on, well, again, what other people are doing.
And that's it. I was lucky enough to kind of just be in an environment at home as well, where I was with friends who weren't then bothered that I poured myself a non-alcoholic sparkling wine to cheers them, and we had there wasn't then
Of course.
you've just tried it, so you may as well have a glass. There wasn't any of that pressure.
Yeah.
And I think the two things there is, like, the world's definitely changing. Like, I'm seeing a lot of people who do drink quite heavily or have done in the past being a lot more kind of accepting of people who don't. I think, it's seen now kind of as a bit quite crass to pressure somebody into drinking. And there's definitely kind of been that change there. And then I also think I've just been attracting a lot more people who are a lot more kind of on the same wavelength. Either they're not drinking, or they're kind of very accepting of people who don't. So, we're definitely kind of seeing a change, even just kind of within my own circles here over in Singapore.
I love that it's happening in Singapore. I think it's amazing. And I think you start to attract what you're doing if you're really believing in it, right? So I have started, I mean, obviously I'm in the industry, but like, people are really starting to tell me their stories, or I'm just noticing it more, or, I think it's something that's happening in the world, right? Like, it's clearly a thing. And I think that when I first got sober, in the first year, I remember a lot of people being like, well, you're just like not drinking. Like, you're going to start drinking again, right? And I was like, no, like, this is a thing. Like, I hope I don't start drinking again. And, I intend to not drink ever again. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 50 years or so. I'm 45. Like, who knows what's going to happen? But I feel very confident in the options that I have available. Like, I just had an Almave and club soda. It tasted great. It tastes to me like I'm having a cocktail. So I don't know why I would need anything else. Because it's like, that to me, like, scratches the itch. I've said this for almost the last 3 years. I can come home from work or end my day with that, or with a glass of wine that is non-alcoholic. And for me, and I've said this to a ton of people, I get the same like relax that I would get from a glass of wine. And that itch is scratched. So like, I don't know why I would go back to something that's much higher in calories, much higher in sugar, and doesn't really make me feel great about myself. Like,
I was exactly the same. And I think it was just, it shocked me, like, as to how much they were just this huge bridge for me to be able to continue doing the things that I enjoy and socializing and maintain those connections that were really important to me. And still drink something that was sophisticated. And I genuinely just was so impressed about how incredible all the non-alc alternatives are. And it was enough. Like, it is enough for me. And that's, yeah, so satisfying.
It really is. I mean, look, I've gotten to the point where club soda is enough. Like, I'm happy with a Perrier in a can, but that took me a long time to get there. And sometimes I like that better. But honestly, if I'm out and an account has something that I like, I am so happy to support it. Even if I don't like it, I'll still order it. But I'm just happy to have an option. And in truth, it's always just delightful. Like, it's just always enough. And I love that. I mean, I attribute, my husband and I both attribute our sobriety to non-alcoholic options. I don't know that we would have been able to stay sober in the very early beginning if we weren't swapping one-on-one, especially in social settings.
100%. I think I was exactly the same for me. And then obviously the more you do it and the more you go to these events, then obviously the easier it gets. But right at the very beginning, and I always say, like, one of my top tips for anyone who just wants to drink less, make your first drink a non-alcoholic alternative. And then if after you've had the one non-alcoholic alternative, you still really want a drink, go and have a drink. But 99% of the time, once you've had the first drink as non-alcoholic, you're satisfied and you've gone, yeah, that non-alc beer was great. I'll have another one. Top tip there for anybody. So non-alc alternatives, let's talk. You are probably going to be like an absolute expert in this. I want to hear from you, like, what is great? Like, what products are amazing?
It's funny. So I'm obsessed with, I've talked about Ted Segers clearly is like my new favorite beer because it tastes like beer.
What I think is just touch on that one just 1 second.
Yes.
I've got questions back because I've not heard of it before.
Yes.
And you said it's non-alc beer for people who are specifically in recovery.
I mean, not specifically, but so Dax Shepard, who has the Armchair Expert podcast, I have no idea. I mean, I think everyone knows who he is, but I don't know. He has been in recovery forever and wanted an NA beer that wasn't an IPA, wasn't like a light, watery, whatever, wasn't a mainstream beer, and wanted something that, and I quote, reminded him of the beer he grew up drinking in his garage in Michigan. And so he and his best friends from like childhood set out to make it, and it tastes like beer. And every time I say that, somebody's like, I don't know what you mean by that. I'm like, taste it and you'll know what I mean by that. Like, it is I mean, I don't know how well you can see this, but like the can is like, it is just like, I feel like a YouTuber right now. The can is like, looks like an old school, like Miller something. And it's just delicious. And it just tastes like beer. Like, I don't know how else to, it's not an IPA. It's just a good Pilsner. I mean, it just came out like 10 months ago, like in general distribution. So I love that. I also love that it's like 50 calories and tastes like beer. I'm loving this new wave of distilled spirits that's coming out. Almave, Lewis Hamilton's I'm drinking it right now, is a huge moment for me. I was a tequila drinker and somebody who was very knowledgeable about it. I can't think of the word. So for me, when I first tasted it, I tripped out. I was like, I was so sick of tasting NA tequilas that just tasted like water with capsaicin in them. And a lot of people feel differently about Almave. I don't know what's wrong with them. It is, it tastes like distilled agave. Like, you smell the Blanco and you're like, oh, that's tequila. Triggering for some. I love it. My husband and I both, like, it's amazing. And then the Pathfinder, which is my like personal new obsession, is an NA Amaro, but it's fermented from hemp seed and then distilled with like 20 botanicals. So this, like, it's unreal, by the way. It's like, I love it. So what I love about like Almave and Pathfinder is that they're spirits that you can taste straight out of the bottle, which with any spirits is not always true. Bless everybody. So the fact that you can like pour it neat, warm, and taste it, huge. And then you can also do all these things with it. And like Pathfinder is in like tons of cocktails and does all this stuff. And So I'm really, really loving that. And then, so I'm loving those. Little Saints has come out with like it's like a smoky, mushroomy mezcal that I really, really like. It's super good. They're cool. They've blown up all over the States right now because everyone wants an adaptogenic RTD.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of that experimentation here happening very, very, very locally. A lot of kind of the mixologists and barmen here who are have got labs in Singapore and kind of playing around with different adaptogens and everything else. Whether or not that'll ever kind of get approved with SFA is
I
another
imagine
thing.
it's hard.
Things are a lot stricter here. Like we don't obviously have like any sort of kind of CBD drinks. I know Fungton were here for a little bit, but the product has been quite temperamental, especially like in the heat and the humidity. A lot of the cans can kind of explode. So so there's a few kind of challenges here with like the Singapore kind of restrictions. Definitely nowhere near kind of as liberal as some other countries in terms of what we can have in them. But of those products, I haven't heard of any of those that you've just said.
I'm gonna have to have some samples sent to Singapore.
Absolutely. So, but we've got Free Spirit here, which are an amazing alcohol-free bottle shop and distribution. So we do kind of get to, and they curate everything as well. So making sure that they're of really high quality. For me, the tequila. So I was never a tequila drinker. I think I drank too much when I was like 14 or something horrible.
That's everyone's story.
Was never able to drink it again. Just absolutely rotten. But there have been a couple of tequilas where I've smelled, even just kind of alcohol free, where like I've opened the bottle, I've smelled them and I've gone, absolutely not. Like I can't even try it, even though I know it's alcohol free. I'm like, absolutely not.
They were so good, and they're so great for cocktails, and they were great, original analogs to substitute in a cocktail. And I love them for that. I just think this new wave of, Giffard is a line from France that has NA liqueurs that are just amazing. And I just love this sort of kind of dialing back to what is really necessary in cocktails or in spirits, or I love anything that's natural, because in the States, natural grocery is a huge play. And so a lot of the spirits can't play because they have potassium sorbate or sodium benzoate or things like that. So Almave is natural, Pathfinder is natural. So these things are, really cool to play with.
And I think that's it, is like the quality is getting, like we're really starting to see like more premium products coming to market, where there's just been no compromise on kind of like, flavor and taste and just experience as well. There's some really beautiful brands coming out of Australia. There's a female-owned distillery, and she's a distiller, Clove and Doe, and they've just got some like really, really beautiful products. And they're not trying to be anything else. So this is the other thing, is like these really incredible, non-alcoholic spirits distilled from kind of native botanicals that aren't trying to mimic a gin or a whiskey or something else. They're a whole beautiful thing in their own right. And, whether you're mixing them with soda water or whether you're actually kind of creating incredible cocktails out of them, they're just a really beautiful product and experience. So it doesn't always have to be, okay, we want to mimic a tequila or we want to mimic something else. They can be something totally new and unique in their own right.
I will say De Soie, which is Katy Perry's brand, just came out with a Spritz Italiano. That is the best Aperol Spritz in a can I've tasted. And I like it because it's less bitter and more sweet, but it's really, really good. And the can is beautiful. And so for me, I'm like, I just like it because it's its own thing. And yes, it's a spritz and it's bright orange and it's whatever, but it's delicious. And I like that they really went off book from what they usually do. And so I just think there's so much on the market and so much more to come. But it's just a really interesting time to try and start a brand or be a brand.
I think on the other kind of end of the spectrum is like, whilst we're seeing a lot of craft going into some of these new products coming out, and some of them really are like exceptional. When I was at kind of FHA, which is like a food and beverage conference here in Singapore a couple of months ago, we kind of seen some people there. I don't want to kind of name any names for brands, but basically kind of a guy who'd just gone, I had a canning plan, and I've basically just taken kind of like really, really basic recipes, very kind of stevia based. And I've created kind of like a gin and tonic flavored soft drink and a mojito flavored soft drink. And he's got about kind of 15 like RTDs, but because he's like very, very, very cheaply made, and we'll be kind of selling them in Coles and Woolworths and all kind of supermarkets in Australia for like 4 cans for $4. So he's kind of like, really, what we're seeing now is he's coming at it from like the other end of the market, where like creating it, when trying the products, like they just taste like a non-alc flavored soft drink, but very kind of stevia based, so he's kind of really positioning it as like 0 calories, 0 sugar, 0 this, but you're kind of really kind of getting but they're kind of flavored, and really kind of trying to come in and kind of undercut a lot of the brands who have got a lot more kind of going into the non-alcoholic gin and tonics versus.
That's happening here. Like large seltzer brands or club soda brands are doing it, like Waterloo and whatever, like LaCroix is doing it. I don't think they'll be successful, but I do think that my hope is that they introduce the idea to somebody who might see an NA cocktail on a menu. But I think there's this really big disconnect between what people are willing to pay for and why they think they're paying for it. So those people are willing to spend $6 on an 18-pack of LaCroix that's flavored like a mojito, but they have no idea why the de-alcoholized rum that's in a non-alcoholic mojito on a menu makes that cocktail so expensive. So, they don't understand that like that product may have been distilled and then de-alked and like, or, yada yada, and like that it has really good ingredients. And so I think there's a really big disconnect. And for that reason, like I have concerns that it cheapens the market, but the market, everything can't be $40, right? So I think if it brings drinkers into the category at some level, and then maybe they see something on sale at Walmart, they buy it, right? Or they see it on Amazon and they have like a gift card, at some point there has to be an entry level. And I don't love that that's it. But
for me, I just don't want that to be someone's first experience of a non-alc alternative. And I think it's the same, right? People who tried non-alc beer even 5 years ago were like, oh my God, that's dreadful, I'm never touching that stuff again. And actually they've just come such a long way. Is like, I don't want it to put trialists off, because actually there are some really incredible products out there. But you're right, it's also this kind of, well, if I'm not drinking alcohol, then and a soft drink's $5, then I'll just drink the soft drink for $5 rather than spend $20 on a cocktail. And I think there's this lack of kind of knowing necessarily what goes into it. And a lot of non-alc options, obviously they're kind of distilled in the same way and then some, or created in the same way. There's you kind of get what you pay for, and there's kind of like that quality element and everything else. But yeah, I think that's kind of one of the biggest challenges the category is facing, is really how to convince people that these are worth paying for.
It's the bane of my existence, and it's education. I mean, look, there's so many people trying to educate through their social media platforms, through et cetera. The distributors aren't doing it, at least in the States. I think, clearly you're doing it through your podcast. Like, I think there's a lot of education that's starting to happen. I feel sometimes like we're all just talking to each other, and I want it to, go more out to people. So I think like, people always ask me like, well, what should I try? And I'm like, or how do I know what to try? Right. And I'm like, first of all, DM me and tell me what you drink for alcohol, and I will introduce you to something you might like. But I think people are afraid of the unknown. And I think, people who have never tried something are desperately afraid of it and desperately afraid of change. And especially people who think that they don't need to stop drinking or slow down on drinking really are afraid. I also think there's this thing about like, if I stop drinking, it's to save money. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand that, but whatever. I'm like, I definitely didn't save any money when I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
But so I think there's a real need for education. And I think as brands start building and start branching out and start really growing into the Targets of the world and the Walmarts of the world, they will only succeed if they manage to figure out the educational piece of it. Because if somebody goes in and buys a really bitter RTD at Walmart because it was on sale and has that, they will never go, and doesn't like it, they will never go back.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing. And look, there's a lot of places to educate right now. TikTok, Instagram, whatever, but you got to do the work. And it's not just posting a really pretty picture of your brand or your can. It's about saying, this is what it tastes like. This is what it's made with, but this is the taste profile. And this is the experience you're going to have. And so I think we really are a little bit behind on that because, again, I think we're talking to ourselves.
And that was it for me. Is I've worked in marketing for 16, 17 years, and I got so into kind of the non-alc space when I stopped drinking. I just could not understand, like, why aren't people talking about this? Why don't people know about this? What can we do to kind of start the conversation? And I think you're right. Like, the category as a whole doesn't know how to talk. Yes, everyone's talking to each other, but there's not kind of any consistency in terms of like how the category is talking to consumers. A lot of brands are sitting in that kind of sobriety space or like the wellness space. And, it's difficult when you call your drink sober or like sober AF and things like that. Then you end up sitting there and you're alienating anyone who just doesn't feel like drinking in that particular moment.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's missing is a lot of kind of these products, and the category is talking to non-drinkers. You're not talking to anybody who just doesn't want to drink on that occasion in that particular moment for however long, or just for that particular drink. And it's definitely kind of what we're seeing. I think Amanda from Naughty shared just some great data at the conference a few months ago, and it was of people who are drinking non-alcoholic alternatives, only 15% are abstainers.
It's higher than, it's less than that now. It's like 96% of people who buy non-alcoholic products are drinkers. And I just heard a piece of data, which was a buyer who buys only spirits and wine will generally spend about, this is for on-premise, will generally spend about $300. Somebody who's buying for non-alc and those two categories will spend 3 times as much. So it was either double or 3 times. Whoever is listening to this that's created that data, I apologize. But it's an increasingly like growing thing. I was at a grocery trade show last week, and the people that had never had NA or were like starting to see it and understand it were blown away. Because I think they're used to not great NA. And I had people that were just like, I'll take 3 of everything. And I think that's really interesting because especially for people like in West Virginia, who, no offense to West Virginia, just didn't know, like it's just not there. And I think people are really used to the older generational products, like products from 20 years ago or wines that have been around for a really long time. And, the quality of things like, bless Gießen, they've been around for the last couple of years and they've crushed it. And they're everywhere in the States. And it's awesome because they're great. And people are loving it. And that, I think, for everybody that's a really accessible, actual de-alked wine, at least in the States, that everybody can wrap their brain around because their Sauvignon Blanc is awesome and their sparkling is awesome. And so people are like, okay, I can get that. I can buy it. It tastes like a Sauvignon Blanc. I know what a Sauvignon Blanc is supposed to taste like. Awesome. Same thing with Naughty, right? Like when Naughty Rosé came out, I was like, that tastes like a rosé. I'm in. Great. And so I think like as the category starts to really grow, like every big store is now putting in a big NA set. Like CVS in the States is putting in an NA set. But it's a matter of what brands will play ball, right? And like pay attention to the educational piece, because you can't just go into CVS and expect that your product is going to do well.
I think it's also kind of having that balance is like what I see whenever I kind of go back to the UK. It's so great to see kind of end of aisle or, you know, a partial aisle of the alcohol section with the alcohol free. Like I'm so happy to see it. But 80% of the brands that are on there are the non-alc versions of existing
Of
popular brands.
yeah.
So you're kind of seeing a lot of like the non-alc Guinness, not shitting on Guinness. I
No, it's
love the
great, but
non-alc Guinness. It's amazing.
same.
But it's like, you know, you've got kind of got your non-alc Heineken's, Carling, Peroni, your non-alc Tanqueray, Gordon's, and then you've maybe got 20% of kind of the more
New brands.
craft products.
Yeah.
And again, it's big alc. It's the power of big alc, maybe.
Well, and it's funny because they have not brought those products here yet. So big out like Diageo has not brought any of that here yet. They will. Guinness, yes, but they will. But I think they're really trying to test in the UK like what the power of craft is, because craft NA has done so well in the UK. I'm sure there's an actual Diageo person who would come over me and say like, you have no idea what you're talking about. But it is interesting that they haven't launched them here. And
I cannot believe that because
they haven't.
They're here in Singapore, right? Like, so.
Yeah. I mean, they're everywhere but here. I think it's largely, I would venture a guess that it is largely because Diageo has vested interest in NA here. But I also think it might be because they're just making a killing in other places and they don't want to crowd the market here. I don't know. But it also here would take away from their alc sales. So I don't know. I don't know what the plan, I mean, I'm sure the plan is to bring them over at some point. I will say this. I was having an interesting conversation with somebody from Diageo, a guy I really love, who was like, Guinness 0.0 will likely be the only ever additional Guinness SKU that sticks. Because they've come out with so many other things. And he's like, 0.0 might be the only one that actually works. And I was like, that's probably true.
It is so good. Like
So good.
I was a Guinness drinker, and I for a very small person, I could drink 6 pints of Guinness on a night. Like, loved it. I definitely my Irish blood in there. But moving to Asia, Guinness doesn't travel very well. And so if it's brewed over this side of the world, the water's different, the taste is different. And I just have never been as satisfied with a Guinness in Asia. The non-alc, the 0.0 Guinness tastes 100 times better than the alc version here. And it's just
that's awesome.
Shocking at how good it is.
So
you know, I'll give them that. Like, I'm all for kind of championing the newer brands and the independents, because I've really seen what goes into them and how they want to truly change drinking behaviors, not just kind of try to keep people drinking more.
In 2018, when Heineken Zero came across my desk, I was at the distributor then. And I remember looking at one of my mentors, who was my boss at the time, and somebody very high up. And I was like, this is stupid. Nobody's going to want this. And he was like, you're 100% wrong. Talk to me in a few years. And now I could obviously eat my words. I've had more Heineken Zero than I know what to do with. But it's so like, I had no idea. I had no idea. And here we are.
I remember my mum and dad, they're like massive drinkers, and so fun. But they were like, a few years ago, my mum was like, oh, I've been trying to like cut down a bit, and I've been drinking like this half-proof wine and like this low, zero wine, you should try it. And I remember like totally fobbing her off and just being like, this is ridiculous. Like, no, what's the point? It's definitely like my initial response was, what's the point? And it's so funny that it's kind of come full circle. I've just gone.
I know, it's bananas. I really think it is. I just, my husband wanted to do dry January years and years and years ago and on. And I just was like, I can't. I'm in the business. I can't. And now I'm just like kicking myself. I mean, everything happens when it's supposed to happen, but I'm like, God, I would have just been so much happier for so much longer.
So look, I actually want to talk a little bit more about kind of retail and hospitality and the challenges that you're facing in getting products stocked there.
As I was just dealing with this last week, I think a lot of retail is open. The grocery world is opening wide right now for NA. A lot of the challenges I'm seeing are in whether or not your product is natural. So potassium sorbate, all of these chemical salt stabilizers are not approved in the majority of natural grocery, which I'm all for. But you need to find an alternative, and it's hard, and formulations are hard, and tastes are hard. So that's a barrier to entry, but not everywhere. Total Wine doesn't care. Large grocery doesn't care. I think we're seeing like Walmart and Target open up huge for NA, and not just NA beer. Like they're really starting to understand the need. Amazon is a huge NA world. So there's a lot of retail space. You just have to find it. And I think a lot of the problem is route to market, which my goal in life is to fix and figure out route to market for NA, because it's different. I come from the 3-tier system, which is under a little bit of attack right now in the US. So I understand distribution and how it works.
NA doesn't. What's the 3-tier system?
Oh, sorry. So in the US, ever since Prohibition, there is a 3-tier system, sometimes a 4th, but basically a maker, a supplier, has to send product to a distributor, a wholesaler, who then sells the product to a retailer or customer or whatever. So a bar or restaurant. So like there's 3 tiers. For taxation, and I don't know, it was a whole thing in 1920. I mean, I do know the reasons. There's a lot of government around it. It is under a bit of fire right now because it's just very outdated, and there's some antiquated laws and whatever. I support it because I worked in it for a long time, but I also understand NA does not fit into it, and they're trying to kind of push NA into a box it doesn't need to be into. With that, I think there's a lot of ways to handle NA that, like, some of it goes into Bev-Alc, some of it goes into grocery distributors. Like, you just have to figure it out. So that's my goal in life. I think in restaurants and bars, NA is doing really, really well with the proper attention from both founder, supplier, and distributor. So it's really like, at the end of the day, a lot of this is figuring out your proper route to market. And there's a lot of options and a lot of confusion. And so, first of all, the United States is insane with laws and who can do what and who can distribute what and what your product is. So that's not helpful. But also, there's there's just a lot of barrier to having a successful, product launch. And so I think a lot of that is happening, but I also will say there are products like Dessois that are doing amazingly. They finally figured it out. I think there's a lot of products that had a very tough start that have retinkered their distribution that are doing great.
And it seems like in the US, bars or just hospitality in general are looking for great non-alcoholic alternatives to have on the menu. They actually want, and do they see the value in having the non-alc option on the menu? Are they, open to having a good selection?
I think it depends on the place.
Okay.
I think it depends on the place. So you cannot be eligible for a Michelin star, I believe, unless you have like a fully fleshed non-alc menu, which is awesome, especially in New York, because New York is phenomenal. LA, I have very, 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 very not found to be NA friendly. Chicago is, it's awful. Chicago is really up and coming, and they're doing a nice job. It's hit or miss in like other big cities. DC is, coming. It just depends. So like it's hit or miss. I think people have a tough time like figuring out what they should do and what they should use, and how it works. So like if you're somebody that gets it, you're totally in. If you're somebody that's like, I'm not going to put this on the back bar because nobody's going to know what it is, and I'm going to put it in the fridge, and no one's ever going to use it again, I'm not going to put it on the menu, no one will ever know. If you are smart and have an NA section on your menu, or even better, have like a, half loaded no, which I think is genius, then you will. But it all depends on the bar, the restaurant, the hotel. A lot of hotels are starting to put it in mini bars, but everything's so corporate that like it just depends.
We've got a lot of interest in hotel stuff here. So Yeah, I've been working with a couple of non-alc brands in the region and kind of doing a little bit of work with Free Spirit, and travel, whether that's kind of travel retail or in flight. And yeah, huge hotel groups really, really, really interested in having the non-alc options. Obviously, this region's a little bit different. Like with the hospitality, it's a bit more of like a struggle, like really convincing them that they're gonna make money. And I think really having to kind of sit down and talk to them that you are leaving money on the table by not
Yes.
having decent non-alcoholic options. You know, they're kind of, when you start to equate it, rather than talk about a customer need and you actually start to talk about money, when you're talking about money, they listen. Rather than just saying, well, this is what customers want, actually saying,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to be able to charge the same, the markups are going to be less because the tax is different, and everything else. They're willing to listen, but it's still convincing and chipping away at like one bar, one restaurant at a time.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. And you think here we've got, especially in Singapore, we are such like a melting pot here. We've got so many different nationalities all kind of living here. You've got a huge selection of people who don't drink for religious reasons, whether you're kind of Muslim or Buddhist or whatever. You've got a huge Chinese population as well who don't drink because of genetic reasons. They kind of get that red, the Asian flush,
glow.
as we call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously kind of you've got a lot of people who are becoming more health conscious, the younger generation who are not drinking and everything else. So you actually think when you start to look at the numbers of people who would choose a non-alc option who don't drink, you would think that it would be a no-brainer. But it's still taking some convincing. We also have the challenge here that people don't like to be the first to do something. They want to see it proven to have worked in so many other places before they do it. So there's always kind of the level of risk here that always tends to be a little bit lower than other parts of the world.
I think it's the same. I think people here are just waiting for like someone else to do something first. And I think Target going into it was a really big deal. Total Wine obviously has done it before, but I think Target really making an effort around it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, amazing. So future predictions. What do you think is going to happen over the next 12 months?
Oh my God. So many things. I mean, I think that, 12 months is not a very long period of time, by the way. I think we're going to see more of this. I think RTDs are going to continue to be huge. I think we are going to see some adaptogen wines come out. There's one I know of that's coming out. I think we're going to see a little bit more celebrity in NA, which in the States is a very big deal. But I think this sort of Lewis Hamilton, Dax Shepard, Brad Pitt of it all is a big deal. And it's what, is selling alcohol. And I think that the non-alc sober people are starting to realize that. I mean, you already have Katy Perry and the Hadids, but I think in the spirit world, it'll be a bit different. And wine world, I think you're going to see a ton of import to the States. So export from you. There's some beautiful wines in Spain that are trying to come over. There's insanity happening in spirits in Europe with triple distillation and dealking that makes you think you're drinking actual spirits. Like I had to double check myself. So I think a lot of that is going to start coming over. I think my hope is that on-premise starts really educating themselves and that everyone in retail starts like paying attention a little bit more to quality. But I think that's an overall like 12-month. I think I think there's a lot of on-premise education that's just starting. And I think that's really key.
Someone new to the non-alc space, I'm going to do a quick kind of fire round. I want a recommendation for kind of each of the products that I tell you. So if someone's brand new, okay, what should they be trying? So let's start with a beer.
I mean, I'm going to say Ted Segers, but I'm also going to say, because that's my favorite. But if you're looking for something like very generic that you can find everywhere, I got to go with Athletic Light. It's my fave. I love it.
Amazing. Yeah. Cider.
So we don't have a ton of cider here. I will say there's a cider that I'm obsessed with that's coming to the States soon, knock on wood, Bulwark from Canada. It's delicious.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. One that I would recommend to try, Bilpin. The Bilpin
Ooh,
ciders, and they've got a bunch of
ooh,
different flavors. Their alcohol-free ginger beer is phenomenal because it's not sweet and
okay.
it's super spicy.
Ooh,
But they've got kind of like, a raspberry and lime cider, and don't necessarily
ooh,
put me on that, but they've got
okay.
like different flavored ciders, and they are excellent. Uh,
Awesome.
Sparkling white wine.
This is like picking a child, for the record. This is a very hard category for me because I like a lot of them. I have to give you like a roundup here because I can't just pick.
Okay.
So I love Naughty. I love Cologne and Null, which is from Germany and I think is phenomenal. I am really loving En Route, which is from Brad Pitt and it's an adaptogen sparkling wine. I'll just stick with three. That's three. It's also different price categories.
Amazing. Sparkling rosé, because it's different.
There's a new brand in the States called Woody's that I think is phenomenal. It's from California. California made, very cute, lower price point, like grocery price point, super good. I Zeno out of Spain has a brilliant sparkling rosé, brilliant. And yeah, I'll just say those two for now.
I'm going to throw one in there called the
I'm gonna
Zero.
get killed, by the way, for these answers.
People are
Just so
like,
you
"Why
know,
did
I'm gonna get killed.
you mention it?" There's one called the Zero, which is
Ooh,
Austrian,
okay.
and
Ooh.
it's unreal. Like, I tried it kind
Oh,
of
I need an
impromptu.
Austrian wine. Interesting.
Uh,
You're gonna have to send me
yeah,
these things.
I'll send you that one because it's really special. Like, I have not tried anything like that before.
Yum.
Let's move on to some spirits. So, non-alc gin.
I don't have Neats Co. from Amsterdam or Berlin. I can't remember where they're from, but they're awesome. Their gin is amazing.
Oh, okay, nice. Okay, I'm gonna add that to the
Hmm.
list. Tequila.
It's a triple instead. Almave.
Okay. Have you ever found any vodka alternatives?
No, because it's a dumb idea. But I will say this: AF has a that vodka spritz, and I had it, and it is the only thing that actually gives the feeling of vodka. To me, I'm like, just drink club soda with tonic or something. Like, I don't understand it. Or just drink tonic. But that AF spritz is delicious. I had it at this show last week and I would buy it and drink it because it's
Okay.
zero sugar and it really does. I was talking to Matt about it. It really does like give you the vodka-y like feeling.
Okay. Interesting.
It's weird,
Interesting.
but I really do like it. I liked it from a vodka perspective.
I'm going to try and find that one as well. Rum.
Caleno.
Yeah.
It's so good to like just get to and dark and spicy. They're coming out with a bunch of other flavors. They have a bunch of RTDs coming out. They're just good people. I love Ellie.
I
She's awesome.
love their brand. Oh my gosh. I need to get a hold of her because I want to try and interview her here. But just everything they
Oh,
do with their brand.
I'll introduce you. Just
Okay,
remind
yes,
me. Yeah,
please.
she's
Everything
awesome.
they do with their brand for me is just, I'm obsessed because they just make everything fun and how it should be. And you just want to go to Kaleno party.
They're so fun. I love them.
Yeah, I love what they're doing. I have to say, I also really like the Captain Morgan Spice Gold 0% rum.
Not tasted it.
Brilliant.
I can't get it.
Yeah, it's actually, you want to throw it in a strawberry daiquiri, you wouldn't know. Like, it's really got that kind of like rum.
Woo. All righty. I'll have to try it.
Yeah. Whiskey.
Naked. NKD. From
Okay.
two women in Kentucky. It is the best whiskey I've ever had. You would think you're drinking bourbon. We had so many people last week be like, excuse me? Like, it smells like whiskey. It's delicious.
Okay, that's interesting because, again, haven't found one that's really
Oh my God, it's mind
got there
blowing.
yet.
Mind blowing.
Okay, amazing. Red wine.
Amanda's going to kill me. Cologne and Null has a Bordeaux blend that is unbelievable. And I will say this Zeno has an amazing one, and Misty Cliffs from South Africa has a Cab Sauv that I don't necessarily think is the best one in the world because I don't love Cab, but everyone who tries it is blown away.
Amazing. It's the one kind of category,
So hard.
category that I've been like, it's been really, really hard. So
Cologne and all, you got to try the Cuvée Rouge 3. It's amazing because surely you can get it there or somehow, but the Cuvée Rouge 3 is unbelievable.
I'll get free spirit to like bring it in.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
always like messaging
Yeah.
them saying, let's bring these in. Let's see if we can get some samples.
Totally.
Any others that you would like to give a shout out to that you think is great?
I will say this for white wine. I think Misty Cliffs has the best, I hate to say this, one of the best, don't anybody yell at me, Sauvignon Blancs I've ever had. Like I tasted it for the first time and I was blown away. I thought it was amazing. And they also have, Zeno has one of the best rosés.
Yeah.
And I've tasted a lot of things. Like I think Naughty has an amazing rosé. Yeah. And I would say if you're going to go for RTDs, I will say this. Little Saints does classic cocktails like nobody's business. And they're sugar-free. They use another sweetener. I don't know what it is. But they make an old-fashioned that is delicious. And very, very good. So, yeah, I think I've covered all the categories that I can think of right now.
I love it. Honestly, thank you so much. I have really, really loved talking to you. I feel like I could keep going.
I know, me too.
I'm really conscious that this is like so close to your bedtime, over your bedtime. But let's do this again.
Totally. Anytime you want.
I would love it. And I'm going to be tapping you up for so many names of people to talk to.
Totally.
Because I just want to let's have more conversations like this, and let's just get people talking about the category.
I love it. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jill. I really have, honestly, I have loved talking to you so much. I think just kind of wrapping it up for my audience. I think just remember wherever you are in your journey, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. As you can tell, Jill and myself really passionate about non-alc alternatives and this category. So just start kind of giving them a try and give them a chance. There really are some amazing products on the market. And I think it's going to help anyone who just wants to drink a little bit less. Thank you to all the listeners that are still here. I am trying to kind of build a community of people who want to drink less and maybe unlock a little bit more of themselves. So please let me know what you think of the podcast. Please just comment and let me know what you'd like to see more of. I'm always open for recommendations of people that we should speak to. And thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.